Hi guys, when I've got the Skoda Fabia Mark 1 up on axle stands, I'm going to take the opportunity to have a look underneath and inspect everything, with a view of cleaning up all the rust in potentially vulnerable areas. It's good to have a nice carpet to lay on, but I better wash it before I give it back to my Auntie Mildred. As I've got the plastic covers off now, I can inspect the whole length of the car, especially the inner part of the sills, which is prone to rust on these cars. The left-hand caliper is original to the car and still works fine after recently renovating it. Just needs cleaning up all the muck on it. The shock absorber has been replaced, but I can see there's a bit of sign of rust at the bottom, so I will clean that up and paint it because it could potentially leak from there. Bump stops have been renewed. Rusty clip holding the heat shield on, I could replace that. And a vulnerable part is underneath the springs. Although this is quite corroded, I believe the metal is quite thick. But I'll just have to see when I clean it up. Hopefully I can get away with just painting it. And of course they fit plastic fuel tanks now, as the metal ones always used to rust. The rear box has been changed, so that's okay. Heat shield's a bit loose here around the clip, so I might do something with that later. It's not too bad, and the other clip's solid. The spare wheel well's rusty. Rubber grommets come loose. I'll retrieve that. As you can see, there's quite a bit of rust on the spare wheel well, so I'll have to do something with that. The trailing rear axle has got some rust on, so I'll have to clean that up. Same again with the spring mount on the right hand side. The right hand calipers are actually a fairly recent one, so that should clean up nicely. The brake pipe connections to the from the flexible pipe to the solid pipe are a bit vulnerable. I'll have to wire brush that one up. I could replace the flexible pipe though. That would probably be worth doing, but they're not leaking at all at the moment, so that's a good sign. These bushes can eventually wear out. You'll hear a clunking noise when you accelerate or brake or go over a bump. There's a bit of corrosion on the edge of the sill at the rear. But then going forward it seems to be okay until we get to the front, near the wheel arch. If we're looking at the sill here at the front, you can see it's quite rogered with a big hole in it. That definitely needs attention, which will need welding as it's an MOT failure. And it looks like there's some rust running down the outside edge of the sill, which could have penetrated through the metal, but hopefully not, as I didn't really want to replace the whole sill, so I'm hoping I can just patch that. So that might have penetrated some holes in a couple of places, and they'll need welding up again. And from a previous inspection, it's quite rusty on the wheel arch end behind the plastic liner, and these cars are prone for that, so it's always worth taking the inner liner out just to check on that, as it can cover up a whole load of sins. Front wishbones are a little bit rusty, but they're quite cheap to replace. Engine mounting bracket, I'll clean that up and paint it. And I'll do the same with this central bracket, or exhaust catcher as my Uncle Bob calls it. Central exhaust is going rusty, but it's not blowing yet, so I don't really need to replace it, but I think I may just do that, as they don't cost a great deal, as well as the pipe bracket, which looks like it's on its last legs. But overall it's not too bad, and I'll work through each issue at once, so it looks like it's turning into a bit of a project, starting with the rusty bits first, which will need grinding down, treating and then painting. Right, I'll get my pressure washer out and clean all the basic muck off for a start. Right, that's a bit cleaner to start with. I'll just get my wire brush out now. I'm favouring one of these cheap rotary wire brushes. Might need more than one of these, or even a different type. If I can get into it, that is. On my Makita drill. Make sure that's tight. And of course for this you need your protective glasses. And some various hand chipping tools. Right, here goes. This may take a while. Knock some of the thicker rust off with a hammer. Onto the axle. Oh dear, my battery's gone. Swap that out. Onto the spare wheel well. This has got a thick coating of underseal on, so I'm having to brush through that. And after several more battery changes later, here's the final result. It's not completely perfect, but I've removed a lot of the rust. Now all I need to do is to treat it with some rust neutralizer. I'm using this Genelite rust converter. I don't know how good it is, but I've heard some good reports about it. So I'll give it a go. Of course you need some protective gloves, a mask, and some goggles. And you want to be using a little bit at a time with this. So I've got a little pot, as it says on the bottle, not to re-pour some old liquid back into the bottle. So I'll put plenty of this on. Rubbing it into all the rusty bits. So it says to apply one coat and then leave it for 15 minutes, and then apply a second coat, leave that for 15 minutes before you apply any paint. So that's what I'll do. First coat completed. That's what it looks like. It's starting to go black, which is what it does when it meets rust. Right, second coat. Although I'm running out of time now, it's getting a bit late. Right, that's about done. So I'm going to have to leave this episode for now, and I'll catch up with you on the second episode of this little mini project. I didn't intend it to be, but it takes ages grinding stuff.